My sister said it was selfish that I had a two-bedroom house to myself while she was cramped with kids. Then she told me, "Do the right thing, let us move in." I smiled and said, "That won't work." Then I added one thing that made her go silent. My sister called me selfish for living alone in a two-bedroom house. Then she asked to move in. I smiled and said 3 words that made her go quiet. "My name is Darcy, and I want you to know something right up front. I am not a mean person. I'm really not. But I've spent so many years being the good one, the easygoing one, the one who just lets things go, that for a long time I didn't even recognize when I was being walked all over. By my own family. By my own sister. So let me tell you how this started. I bought my house 3 years ago. 2 bedrooms, a small yard, a front porch I actually drink my morning coffee on. I worked for it. Every single dollar of the down payment. I saved myself. No inheritance, no help from anyone. Just me, a spreadsheet, and 5 years of saying no to vacations, new cars, and anything that wasn't essential. My coworker Pam used to joke that I was living like a monk with a 401k. She wasn't wrong, honestly. And I was proud of that house. I am proud of it. Now my sister Renee, she's 4 years older than me, married to a guy named Todd, and they have 3 kids. A 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a toddler who, God bless him, has never once slept through the night apparently. They rent a 2-bedroom apartment about 40 minutes from where I live. And look, I get it. 3 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment is a lot. I actually feel for her in that sense. But what I didn't expect was what she decided to do with that feeling. Started with a phone call. I picked up on the second ring. Renee's voice had that particular tone. You know the one? Where someone is pretending to be casual but there's something sitting right underneath it, waiting. She asked how I was doing, asked about work, mentioned the kids. Normal enough. And then she said it. "You know, Darcy, it's kind of wild that you have that whole big house to yourself." I told her it wasn't that big. "It's literally just 2 bedrooms. She said, "Yeah, but there's just you." And I said, "Yes, Renee. There is just me. That's the point." She laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. And then she changed the subject. That was the first call. There were more. Over the next few weeks, she kept circling back to it. Casually at first, mentioning how cramped their apartment was, how the kids were practically sleeping on top of each other, how Todd's mom kept suggesting they move to a bigger place but rentals were just so expensive right now. I listened. I sympathized. Because I'm a decent human being. And also because I genuinely didn't think she was going where she was going. I should have known. Do you think I had any idea what was coming? Because honestly, I didn't see it at all. Then one Sunday she called again. And this time she skipped the small talk entirely. She said, "Darcy, I've been thinking. You have that second bedroom just sitting there. And we are really struggling with space. Don't you think the right thing to do would be to let us move in? At least for a little while. I mean, it's the least you could do. It's selfish, honestly, keeping all that space to yourself when family is suffering." I sat there for a second. Selfish. She called me selfish. Me. The person who saved for 5 years and bought a house on her own and has literally never asked a single member of my family for a single thing. She called me selfish. Now here's where I have to be honest with you. My first instinct was to apologize. No. I know how that sounds. But that's what years of being the easygoing one will do to a person. My mouth was actually opening to say, "I'll think about it." Which with Renee means yes, when something in me just stopped. I thought about the apartment. Me, Renee, Todd, 3 kids and 1 bathroom. I thought about my porch. My quiet mornings. The life I had built for myself by myself. And I smiled. Not that she could see it. But I smiled. And I said, "That won't work." She went silent. And then I added one thing, and I'll tell you exactly what it was. But first, let me back up a little, because to understand why those words landed the way they did, you have to understand the history between me and Renee. Because this moment, this phone call, it wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment I finally decided I was done pretending it was normal. And what I'm about to tell you, what came before all this, is going to make your jaw drop. Stay with me. Renee and I grew up in Central Ohio. Mom, Dad, Renee, me, and our grandmother Loretta, who lived in the in-law suite out back and was, without question, the only person in that house who ever truly saw me. Renee was the firstborn. And in our family that meant something. Her school performances were events. Mine were nice. When she cried, the whole house shifted. When I cried, my mom would say, "Darcy, you're so sensitive." Like it was a character flaw I needed to work on. I'm not here to trash my parents. They weren't terrible people. But they had a system. Renee first, Darcy figures it out. And I always did figure it out. That was kind of my whole thing. When we were teenagers, Renee borrowed $60 my aunt had given me for my birthday and never paid it back. When I brought it up, she told Mom I was obsessing over money. And somehow I ended up apologizing. I still don't fully understand how that happened. When I was 17, I saved up from my bakery job and bought myself a camera. Renee borrowed it for a party, dropped it, broke the lens, and her response was, "It's just a camera, Darcy, you're so dramatic." No apology. No replacement. Nothing. And the thing is, I kept being nice to her anyway. Because that's what you do with family, right? You forgive, you move forward. But there's a difference between not holding a grudge and not remembering. I remembered everything. When I moved out at 23, my grandmother Loretta pulled me aside and held both my hands. She said, "Darcy, your heart is a gift. But you are allowed to be selective about who you give it to." Cried. She was the only one in that house who said goodbye like it actually mattered. We had phone calls every Sunday morning until she passed, about 2 years before I bought my house. Honestly, part of why I worked so hard for that house was because of her. I wanted something that was mine. Something nobody could borrow, break, and hand back without an apology. Back to the phone call. When I said, "That won't work," the silence on Renee's end was something else. It was the silence of a person who had never once heard no from me. Almost insulted. Then she found her voice. "Excuse me. It won't work, Renee. I'm not having 5 people move into my house. I'm not asking for a mansion. It's 1 room. It's called being a family." And that's when I said the thing that made her go quiet for a very long time. "You still owe me $60. I know how that sounds. $60, really, Darcy? But it wasn't about the money. That $60 was 20 years of borrowing and breaking and never once making it right, all compressed into one specific, undeniable moment we both remembered. And Renee knew it. The second I said it, she knew exactly what I meant. The silence went on so long I checked my phone to see if the call dropped. It hadn't. Finally she said quietly, "I can't believe you're bringing that up right now. I can't believe you called me selfish," I said. She hung up. And I sat on my porch, my house, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Like I had finally said the true thing instead of just the convenient one. But I also knew Renee. And I knew it wasn't over. 2 days later my mom called. I stared at the screen for a long moment before I answered. Because I already had a feeling, and I was right. What my mom said next showed me this wasn't just a one-sister problem. It went deeper than that. Much older, much more complicated. And honestly, I was not ready for it. My mom's name is Carol. Not a villain. Just a woman with a blind spot the size of Ohio. And that blind spot had Renee's name on it. She opened with, "So I heard you and your sister had a disagreement." Disagreement? I walked her through it calmly. Renee asked to move her whole family in, called me selfish when I said no, then hung up on me. Mom listened. Then she said, "Well, Darcy, she does have 3 kids." And there it was. She'd picked a side before she ever dialed my number. Did that surprise me? It shouldn't have. But it still stung. "That room is my home office," I said. "And even if it were empty, it's my house. Pay the mortgage. I decide who lives there. Nobody's disputing that, sweetheart." Tone though. The tone absolutely was disputing it. Then she said, "Your grandmother always said family comes first, Darcy." She brought up Grandma Loretta. To make the opposite point Loretta would have made. I had to press my lips together to keep from saying something I'd regret, because the woman who told me my heart was a gift and I was allowed to be selective would never have used that phrase to guilt me into handing over my house. Never. I said very evenly, "I know what Grandma said, Mom. I was there too." And then I ended the call. Politely. No dramatics. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. There's a specific kind of lonely that comes from calling your mom and realizing she phoned you to deliver your sister's message. It's its own flavor of awful. But then, unexpectedly, I got a text from my cousin Brianna. Dad's side, warm but distant since our 20s. She'd heard through the family grapevine and asked if she could call. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Turns out Brianna had her own history with Renee. Loans that never came back, favors that became expectations. "Your sister," she said with a tired laugh, "has always treated the people who love her like a subscription service. You keep providing, she keeps taking, and nobody ever cancels. Mean. She wasn't wrong. But then Brianna said something that actually shifted my thinking. The question isn't whether Renee is wrong, she obviously is. The question is what you actually want. Distance. An apology. Real change. Because those are three very different paths. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so busy defending my no that I forgot to figure out what I was even fighting for. What did I want? I think a lot of us do that. Honestly, we get so focused on being right that we lose track of what we actually need. Does that sound familiar to anyone? What I told Brianna was this. I didn't want to lose Renee entirely. Despite everything, despite the camera, the $60, 2 decades of being the one who just figures it out, I didn't want permanent distance. I just wanted her to actually see me. Maybe for the first time. Brianna said. Then you need to make her uncomfortable enough to look. Her advice was simple. Stop initiating. No smoothing things over, no being the bigger person just to keep the peace. Let Renee come to me, if she chose to. And in the meantime, live my life in a way that made it very clear I wasn't sitting around waiting. So I painted my second bedroom. Deep green, which I'd been putting off for a year. Got a new desk. Made it the home office I always said it was. Posted photos. Maybe a little petty. I'll own that. Then I waited. A month went by. Part of me genuinely wondered if the silence would just become permanent. If Renee had decided the line I drew was one she'd simply stay on the other side of forever. But then someone reached out that I did not expect at all. Not Renee. Now, Todd and I had never been particularly close. He's a decent enough guy. Quiet, a little passive, the kind of man who gets along with everyone because he rarely has a strong opinion about anything. In 5 years of him being my brother-in-law, our conversations had mostly been about sports neither of us followed that closely, and whether the potato salad at family cookouts needed more mustard. So when his name came up on my screen, I genuinely just stared at it. Answered. He skipped the small talk, which honestly impressed me. He said, Darcy, I just want to say, the way Renee approached you was wrong. That's not how you ask someone for help. And I should have told her that before she called you, and I didn't, and I'm sorry for that. I did not see that coming. Oh. I asked him why he was calling now, a month later. He said he tried to talk to Renee about it sooner, but she dug in. Convinced herself that I was the one being unreasonable, that family should share, that I'd come around eventually. But a month of silence from me had apparently rattled her more than she wanted to admit. She misses you, he said. She won't say it like that. But she does. I appreciated Todd calling. I really did. But I also wasn't going to let one sincere phone call from her husband undo everything, you know? I told him I appreciated it, and that I wasn't angry, but that if Renee wanted to talk, she knew my number. He understood. We hung up on good terms. And 2 days later, Renee called. I won't lie, I let it ring twice before I picked up. Just twice. I'm human. Her voice was different. Quieter. Less certain. She said, I don't really know how to start this. I said, just start somewhere. She took a breath and said, I shouldn't have called you selfish. That wasn't fair. You worked hard for your house and it's yours and I had no right to make you feel bad about it. I let that sit for a second. Because here's the thing about apologies from people who rarely give them. You want to receive them carefully. Not coldly but carefully. Because a real apology deserves a real response. Not just an immediate it's fine, don't worry about it, that makes everyone comfortable and changes nothing. So I said, thank you. That means a lot. And I want to be honest with you too. It wasn't just the house thing. It's been a long time coming, Renee. Silence. Then, I know. Just those 2 words. But the way she said them, she knew. We talked for a long time that night. Real talking, not the surface-level check-in stuff we'd been doing for years. She told me she'd been overwhelmed. 3 kids, a tight apartment, Todd working long hours, feeling like everything was on her. I heard all of that. I genuinely did. But I also said carefully, that overwhelmed doesn't give anyone the right to treat the people they love like resources to be used. She didn't push back on that. Which told me more than anything else could have. Now, did this one conversation fix everything? Absolutely not. I want to be real with you about that. One phone call doesn't erase 20 years of patterns. But it cracks something open. And sometimes that's where it starts. Just a crack. What I did next, though, is the part that I think actually changed things between us long term. Because I made a decision that surprised even me. I invited Renee over. Just her, not Todd, not the kids. Just the 2 of us, a Saturday afternoon, my house, coffee on the porch I love so much. And I want to tell you what happened during that visit. Because it's the moment that shifted everything. Not dramatically, not with a big speech or a blow-up argument. Just quietly, the way the most important things usually happen. She showed up with flowers. Grocery store flowers. The kind wrapped in that plastic sleeve with a rubber band still on. Renee is not a flowers person, never has been. So the fact that she showed up holding them like she wasn't quite sure what to do with them made me smile before she even got through the gate. I put them in a jar. I don't own a vase, which she found hilarious for some reason. And we sat on the porch with coffee and I let her talk. She talked for a long time. About the apartment, the kids, the pressure she'd been feeling. But then she said something that I hadn't expected. She said, "I think I've always just assumed you were fine. Like you're Darcy, you always figure it out. I never stopped to think that maybe that wasn't fair to put on you." I looked at her for a second. Then I said, "That's the nicest and saddest thing you've ever said to me." She laughed. A real one this time. And then she got a little teary, which made me a little teary. And we both pretended we weren't by taking very deliberate sips of coffee at the same time. Very dignified. I told her about Grandma Loretta, about those Sunday morning phone calls, about how much of my drive to buy this house came from wanting something that was mine, something that represented the life I'd built quietly, without anyone noticing. Renee got quiet when I said that. I don't think she'd ever heard me talk about any of it that way. She said, "I didn't know you felt invisible." I said, "I know you didn't. That's kind of the whole thing." We sat with that for a while. The afternoon light was doing that golden late autumn thing where everything looks a little softer than it really is. Felt appropriate, honestly. Now, did she apologize for the camera? For the $60? Not in so many words. But she said something that covered all of it. She said, "I think I've taken you for granted for most of our lives and I'm sorry for that." Genuinely. Is that enough? I've thought about that a lot. I think the honest answer is, it's a start. It's a real start. And after years of getting nothing, a real start feels significant. Here's what happened in the weeks after that visit. And I want you to hear this part because it's the part that actually made me believe something had shifted. Renee didn't ask me for anything. Not once. She texted just to check in. She sent me a photo of her youngest doing something ridiculous with a bowl of cereal with the caption, "Thought you'd appreciate this chaos." She called on my birthday, which before you think that's a low bar, she had forgotten it twice in the last 4 years. She remembered. I called. And one Sunday morning about 6 weeks after that porch visit, my phone rang. 'Twas Renee. I picked up and she said, "I don't really have a reason to call. I just wanted to talk. I thought about Grandma Loretta and those Sunday mornings." And I said, "That's the best reason there is." We talked for an hour about nothing important. Her kids, my houseplants, which are thriving, thank you. Her job, a show we'd both apparently been watching without knowing it. Just two sisters talking. Now, is everything perfect? Well, we still have history, and history doesn't disappear. My mom still has her blind spot, though she did quietly apologize to me about a month later in the way she apologizes for things. Which is to say, she mentioned that she hoped things were good between me and Renee and then immediately changed the subject. For Carol, that's basically a formal statement of regret. I'll take it. Brianna and I are closer now than we've been since childhood, which is maybe the unexpected good thing to come out of all of this. We get lunch every few weeks. She still calls Renee a subscription service sometimes, but with more affection than she used to. And the second bedroom. Still my home office. Still deep green. Still mine. I think about what Grandma Loretta said to me, "Your heart is a gift, but you are allowed to be selective about who you give it to." I used to think that meant protecting yourself from people. But I think now it means something more than that. It means giving your whole heart to the people who have shown you they'll handle it carefully. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the people who hurt you are capable of becoming those people. If you give them the chance to try. Renee is trying. And so am I. That feels like enough. More than enough, actually. So that's my story. All of it. The phone call, the $60, the grocery store flowers, and the Sunday morning that reminded me of my grandmother. If any part of this felt familiar to you, I'd really love to know. Have you ever been the one who just figures it out in your family? Have you ever had to draw a line with someone you love? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, a like would mean a lot to me. It genuinely helps more than you know. If something didn't sit right with you, tell me that too. I can take it. I've been handling things on my own for years. I'm used to it. Thank you for being here and for listening all the way to the end. It means everything.